My name is Douglas Madden, a 48-year-old man living with my wife, Louise Madden, who is 45. My wife is a true treasure. We have been together for 20 years, and during this time we have been blessed with 2 beautiful sons, aged 5 and 8, and an older daughter, Cindy, who is currently a second-year college student at the age of 19. We are a large, close-knit family, living comfortably thanks to my rotational job. I can spend 3 weeks with the family and then leave for a couple of months to work in another state. However, I always return with lots of gifts, and my children always welcome me joyfully. I own a 4-seater pickup truck that allows our family to go on long trips and spend time outside the city. Everything seemed perfect. A beautiful, well-kept wife always waiting at home, and equally wonderful children. What could be better? But one day, when I returned from a prolonged business trip that lasted over 4 months, my daughter Cindy did approach me when I sat in the car and was about to leave for the store. She came out of the house, quickly got into the car, and immediately began to speak. "Dad, we need to talk face to face, so that Mom doesn't know about this conversation." I was surprised by such secrecy and decided to inquire, "What happened?" "Mama is behaving extremely strange. When you are not at home, she often disappears during the day and may come home late in the evening and—" she began, and before finishing her sentence, a tear rolled down her cheek. After calming down, she continued, "I decided to follow her one day, so I skipped college classes and asked my friend, who has a car, to help me track her. That day, I found out who our mom secretly meets. It's a gas station attendant. I don't know his name, but you seem to visit him often and chat with him." The man my daughter mentioned was none other than Eric. Indeed, I often stopped by him before long trips. I wouldn't dare to call him a friend. Rather, he was an acquaintance with whom I could chat and enjoy a tasty hot dog before hitting the road. "And how often does Mom disappear when I'm not around?" I asked. "Almost every day. It's been going on for over a year, and I'm tired of enduring and keeping it to myself. I used to try to justify her, thinking maybe she made friends or just went out for a walk, to have some alone time. I understand her sometimes. It can be tough with kids. But after I saw her entering the hostel with this man, all my doubts disappeared instantly." Cindy shared all this, and it was evident how much she was concerned, and how tired she was of keeping it all to herself. "Stop. But who does she leave the kids with if you say she might return late in the evening?" "She asks Grandma and Grandpa, and when I come back late from studying or hanging out with friends, I often see them in our house. I'm tired of it. It's like they don't understand what's going on." Cindy started to panic, and hugging her I said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. Everything will be fine." "Really? I'm really worried that our whole family will fall apart because of this," Cindy confessed. "I said everything will be fine. I'll try to fix the situation. Promise? I'll do my best." I kissed her, and she left me alone in the car. I couldn't believe what I had just heard from my daughter. It was beyond reality for me. But at some point, I decided to pull myself together and drove off. It was as if I wasn't controlling the steering wheel. My hands were shaking, and I didn't notice how I ended up at the gas station, although I was supposed to go to the store for groceries. Inside, Eric greeted me. "Hey, buddy, you haven't been here for a while. Did your business trip get extended?" He looked quite cheerful, and at that moment, I wanted to grab some heavy object and barely held myself together. "Hi, Eric, just for a second." Grabbing a bag of chips, I headed to the checkout to get out of there as soon as possible. But at the checkout, Eric started questioning me again. "You don't look great. and you seem a bit uncommunicative. Is everything okay with you? Yes, I'm fine. Just ring up these damn chips, and I'll leave. Are you sure you can drive? Maybe call an ambulance? Let me pay for the damn chips, I started, unable to hold back. Got it? Got it. You're not in the mood. Drop by when everything's okay, or if you want to share what happened in your life. I paid and quickly left, just to avoid seeing Eric's face. Returning home with groceries, I was greeted by my boys and my wife, who approached and kissed me on the cheek. You're our man. We all love you very much. Come to the kitchen, darling. Dinner is waiting for you, Louise said, and I couldn't look at her as usual, as if my world was gradually falling apart. Surprisingly, she didn't notice anything strange in me, behaved as usual, showed care, and asked me about work. I spoke straightforwardly without much emotion, and in the evening, when Louise wanted intimacy, I declined. Only then did she decide to ask, Honey, what happened to you? You look depressed. I'm fine. My head hurts, and I just want to sleep. After my words, she immediately backed off, brought me a painkiller, and we went to sleep. In the morning, it seemed to me that out of 9 hours of sleep, I had slept for a maximum of 1 or 2 hours. When washing up in the bathroom, I saw in the mirror as if another person, as if something in me had burned out, and I was no longer alive. Louise was my high school sweetheart, but when I proposed to her at graduation, she rejected me. We hadn't seen each other for a couple of years until we met again at a party thrown by a mutual friend, and that's when we started our relationship. There were always guys chasing after her, but she chose me, and that motivated me to move forward and not stop. And this feeling persisted throughout our marriage. I literally blessed this woman, and now it all seemed to collapse in an instant. Cindy noticed my changes, so after lunch, she approached me when no one was in the living room. Dad, what's going on? What are you planning to do? She asked. I don't know yet, Cindy. It's hard to reassess everything. Don't make things up for yourself. You just need to sit down and talk to her calmly, without swearing. I think she'll feel ashamed and realize what she might lose. The most important thing is for you to be able to forgive her. I understood my daughter's position. She wanted to preserve our world, to keep the family together. But I couldn't just sit down and talk to Louise, because she was the person I always trusted, thinking I knew her well. And now it turns out, I don't know her at all. I decided to take drastic measures. I called my lawyer, Michael Morse, who explained the action plan to me. He said there were no real proofs, so he suggested hiring a private detective to find out whether Louise was really cheating on me or if it was just friendly flirting. He mentioned that later, if I decided to divorce her, I could file for divorce and attach evidence of her infidelity. Then there would be a 99% chance that I could get custody of the kids. I didn't like these options. I wanted to teach them a lesson, but I reluctantly agreed to hire a private detective. My next business trip was scheduled in 3 weeks, and Louise knew about it, so she spent almost all her time at home with the kids and me. I realized she wouldn't go on dates with her lover while I was at home. Therefore, I needed to leave for work for 2 months to let the private detective start his work. So I had to work, knowing that my wife might be sleeping with some gas station attendant. Seriously? I couldn't wait, so after a week and a half, I told Louise that I urgently needed to leave for work. It's a pity, of course. If it's necessary, go, dear. By the way, when will you be back? Her reaction annoyed me the most. In about a month, I said. Louise nodded satisfactorily, and if I hadn't noticed it before, I now saw how her mood improved with this news. and it infuriated me. The next day I moved from hotel to hotel, informing my lawyer and the private detective in advance that I deliberately pretended to leave the city. "Douglas, why did you do this? Where are you rushing?" Michael Morse confronted me. I told him that I didn't have time to wait, and I needed any evidence. I also promised to pay him and the private detective double if, within a week, they caught my wife with another man and promptly informed me. Nothing happened on the first day, so I decided to drown my stress in alcohol. I woke up the next day in the evening, missed calls from my wife and the lawyer. I spent the second day in a binge. On the third day, the private detective called me and said that Louise had just met with a man, and they took a taxi somewhere. I received a couple of photos on my phone, clearly showing Louise and Eric looking happy in each other's company. At that moment, I decided to call Cindy. "Hi, Cindy. Are you at home now? Where are the kids?" "Dad, what's wrong with your voice? Didn't you go anywhere?" "Sweetie, please, just answer my question. I'll explain everything to you later." "Mom left again. Grandma and Grandpa should be here soon." "Okay, thanks. But Dad, you remember the promises you made to me?" "Yes, I remember everything. Don't worry, I'll get in touch with you later. Love you," I finished, and we ended the conversation. 20 minutes later, I received a notification on my phone that Louise and Eric had entered a hostel. However, I couldn't figure out the exact location from the pictures, so I asked for the address. The private detective told me it would be unnecessary and better not to intervene. So I called him directly and started telling him that if he didn't send me the address, he would lose his entire fee. In the end, I managed to find out the address of the hostel where my wife and her lover were, and realizing it was my biggest mistake. I had a couple of shots of whiskey and set off. In 15 minutes, I was standing at the main entrance of the hostel when my lawyer immediately called. "Douglas, are you out of your mind? Why did you come here?" "I have an important matter," I said, and hung up. In the same second, I received a message from a private detective. "Douglas, you're going to ruin the entire operation. Please leave and stay in the hostel. We will contact you." I decided to reply with a laughing emoji and wrote that I couldn't sit still, realizing that my perfect wife was cheating on me right now. I entered the hostel and didn't understand which room to go to. Then I decided to approach the receptionist. "Good afternoon, miss. My brother was here today." At that moment, I showed her a photo of Eric. "And I need to give him some things. His phone is off. Could you tell me in which room he is?" "Yes, of course. He is in room 314 with his girlfriend," she replied. "Thank you very much. Have a good evening," I said, and a thought crossed my mind. Girlfriend? Ha! Amusing. Going up to the third floor, I decided to listen to what was happening in the room. I could faintly hear female moans. It infuriated me even more, and I didn't want to wait any longer. I started banging on the door. First, I ran 3 times and hit the door with all my might, and then kicked it with my foot, completely breaking it down. I saw a large double bed with the 2 of them, Louise and Eric, on it. Louise was very scared and trying to cover her body with the blankets, while Eric confidently stood up and said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I was surprised by his audacity, because Eric was almost half my size, but barked at me like a bulldog. It infuriated me even more, and I took a piece of the door and hit Eric directly with it, making him fall. Louise then stood up from the bed and approached me, grabbing me and tearfully saying, "Douglas, please stop. Let's talk." She stopped my second blow, holding me tightly. I couldn't control myself, feeling extremely hurt. I felt Louise's warm body, her arms, legs, breath. I didn't want her to cry, and I still loved her. She held on to me tightly, and I let go of the wooden stick, embracing her in return. "Forgive me, forgive me, forgive me," she said, crying at that moment, and tears streamed down my face, too. I tried my best to push away all thoughts of her betraying me. Happy moments of our 20-year marriage, vacations, waiting for our daughter and then our sons, surfaced in my mind. It seemed like we embraced for an eternity until an unexpected hit struck my back. It was Eric, who stood up and decided to attack at the right moment. He hit me, but I stood on my feet. Louise wanted to stop him, but he pushed her aside and she fell. After this, my patience went out of control. I attacked him again, and a scuffle began. I grabbed him by the hair and threw him towards the mirror, which shattered instantly. Eric couldn't do anything anymore. I took hold of him and started delivering blows, but he resisted. At that moment, guests who heard the noise and the hostile administrator rushed into the room. Eric tried to break free, but I didn't let go, despite the screams around me. Eric tried to grab a shard of glass, but I didn't allow him to do that, throwing him violently aside. However, I didn't anticipate that there might be an open window at that moment. Due to my shove, Eric ran at great speed towards the window. I heard the impact on the asphalt and an accident happened. Everything was like in a fog for me. At first, I didn't understand what happened. I didn't want it to end up this way. People started shouting at me, "What have you done? Murderer!" But I couldn't comprehend anything. The hostile administration had apparently called the police the moment I was breaking the door, and at the same moment Eric jumped out. 2 policemen burst into the room. They saw a robbery, a woman lying on the floor crying, and me, who looked like a criminal. One of the policemen introduced himself to me, recited my rights, and then said, "Mr. Douglas Madden, you are suspected of committing a crime against human life. You are under arrest." They took me out of the hostel where my lawyer had already arrived. The only words I managed to hear were, "Douglas, you're a real idiot," he shouted. But it didn't matter anymore. I was taken to the police station, and about 30 minutes later, my lawyer, Michael Morse, arrived. I told him the whole truth. Then the lawyer said that things were bad. If Eric didn't wake up, according to the state laws, I would fall under involuntary manslaughter, and I would face from 2 to 10 years of imprisonment. Everything would depend on the testimonies of witnesses and whether I admitted guilt voluntarily. Michael Morse pointed out that it's too early to draw any conclusions since nothing is known yet, and we need to wait at least a couple of days. However, he advised me to confess everything right now. "Douglas, understand. A mere accident won't cut it here, as there were at least 7 witnesses who saw you push him, including your wife. But that's her right to testify against you or not. Besides, one of the witnesses recorded a video on their phone of how everything happened, and I'm sure you don't look like the victim in that footage. Moreover, the hostel will most likely hold you accountable too, as you damaged property. In general, you've created a lot of problems for yourself, and I'm afraid I won't be able to help you much. Your only option is to confess to everything." I listened to Michael and realized that my life was completely ruined, and the worst part was that I didn't keep the promise to my daughter. 2 days later, I found out that Eric couldn't withstand it in the hospital, which means I am responsible for it. The investigation lasted for 2 months. Louise and I lived separately, and Cindy came to see me a couple of times, crying a lot and blaming Louise for everything. She was afraid that I might go to jail soon. Michael Morse didn't give positive forecasts, and I still hadn't made a sincere confession, blaming everything on an accident and worsening my situation. As far as I know, only 2 witnesses confirmed considering it an accident. while others, on the contrary, said that I did it intentionally. This meant the situation was very bad. Eric's wife made things worse by accusing me of all possible sins, claiming that I deprived her family of a breadwinner, and so on. I stubbornly refused to admit my guilt, and Michael kept urging me to do it before the trial. But in the end, I only listened to Cindy, who strongly asked me to do so. During the investigation, it turned out that I committed a crime under strong, uncontrollable emotions. As a result, I fell under unintentional crime, which meant I could expect a sentence of less than 10 years, and there was a good chance of parole if I cooperated with the investigation. 3 months later, the trial took place, during which all the evidence of my guilt and involvement was presented. My lawyer only stood up and said a few words in my defense, claiming that the crime I committed was entirely due to my wife's infidelity, which deceived me for over a year. Surprisingly, I felt calm. I think I came to terms with the situation. The judge pronounced the verdict, giving me 8 years with the possibility of early release, and I had to pay a substantial amount to the hostel and Eric's wife. I am very sorry for how everything turned out. Louise contacted me several times, only to file for divorce. The most painful part is that I fought for this woman my whole life, and during the trial, she didn't say a word in my defense. She just confirmed having a relationship with Eric. At least I learned that you shouldn't let people get too close to your heart, regardless of whether they are men or women. Otherwise, in a fit of emotions, you might do a lot of foolish things that you'll regret for the rest of your life. I deeply regret what happened. I didn't want to harm that guy, but circumstances unfolded in such a way that I now have to bear the consequences for not being able to control myself.